June 6th, 1944, before dawn off Normandy, 14 armored bulldozers were ordered down landing craft ramps and into the channel before the beaches were secure. They were supposed to clear D-Day's first obstacles. Some never reached the sand. To understand why 14 bulldozers were dropped into the channel before dawn on D-Day, you have to start with what the invasion planners believed the first minutes on the beach would look like. They expected chaos. Not abstract chaos, but a very specific mechanical problem. The assault waves going into Normandy on the 6th of June 1944 would meet belts of obstacles built to break landing craft before men could even get ashore. Belgian gates, timber stakes tipped with mines, steel hedgehogs, log ramps, beach roadblocks, anti-tank walls, wire, craters, wrecked craft, everything designed to hold vehicles at the tide line and keep the beach clogged under fire. That mattered because the invasion did not depend only on infantry getting onto the sand. It depended on movement, men, trucks, tanks, artillery, bulldozers, engineers, ammunition, fuel, ambulances, recovery vehicles. If the exits off the beach stayed blocked, the whole assault slowed in the most dangerous place possible, the open shoreline, inside artillery range, with the tide rising behind it. So Allied planners gave one class of machine an unusually violent assignment: bulldozers. Not as rear area construction equipment, not as post-battle support, as assault tools. Machines expected to land under fire, push through wreckage, drag obstacles, fill craters, clear lanes, and carve the first usable paths off the beaches while the battle was still underway. The machines chosen for that job were not purpose-built amphibians. They were crawler tractors turned into combat engineers by necessity. Most were Caterpillar D7S, roughly 24,000 pounds in standard form before armor, fittings, and military modifications. Once fitted with dozer blades, protective plating, and waterproofing for the landing, their operating weight climbed higher. That extra steel gave operators some protection against rifle fire and shell fragments. It also gave the sea more weight to work with. Mechanically, the idea made sense on paper. A crawler tractor had traction, pushing force, and a blade that could move sand, timber, and steel faster than teams of men with explosives and hand tools. On a crowded beach, that mattered. A dozer could shove a disabled truck aside in seconds, pull a broken obstacle clear, or cut a ramp through a dune while infantry still fought around it. In the field, the problem was getting the machine there. The English Channel on D-Day was not a controlled delivery route. It was a rough, cold body of water under wind, current, swell, and combat pressure. The bulldozers were loaded aboard landing craft tank, or LCTs, and many were intended to be launched before the craft fully grounded. Some would be run down ramps into shallow water and expected to wade the rest of the way to shore. The theory was simple: unload early, keep the landing craft moving, and put the dozers to work at once. But the theory assumed manageable surf, predictable depth, and machines that could keep their footing after entering the water. Those assumptions would not hold everywhere. By the spring of 1944, the Allied invasion force had spent months preparing for the largest amphibious assault in history. Engineers studied beach gradients, tide tables, currents, and German defenses. Specialized vehicles were assembled for the first waves: duplex drive tanks, armored engineer vehicles, demolition teams, bridging units, recovery sections, and among them, small groups of bulldozers assigned to beach clearance tasks that had to begin almost immediately. These dozers were not glamorous machines in the invasion plan. They were practical ones. Their job was to solve physical problems faster than men could die from them. An obstacle field on a Normandy beach was not just a line of objects. It was a timing mechanism. At low tide, the obstacles stood exposed, forcing landing craft to weave or stop. At rising tide, many would disappear beneath the surface and become hidden hazards. A craft striking one at the wrong angle could tear its hull, flood its compartment, trap troops inside, or drop them into water too deep to cross under load. Even a successful landing could become a pileup if the first vehicle stalled at the shingle bank or the beach exits. Back to the machine. A bulldozer on that shore had three immediate advantages. It could push, it could pull, and it could keep working after the plan had already broken down. That last point mattered most. Normandy was not designed to stay orderly for long. Smoke, shell fire, disabled craft, drowned vehicles, and shifting traffic patterns would destroy neat sequencing almost at once. A dozer did not need perfect conditions. It needed enough ground support to move and enough room to lower the blade. But a bulldozer also had one severe weakness in amphibious work: weight. A crawler tractor is effective because it puts heavy force into the ground through wide tracks. On land, that is its strength. In surf, that same mass becomes a liability. The machine has no buoyancy worth trusting, no speed to outrun a swell, and no margin once water rises above the wrong components. Add armor plate, waterproofing complications, fuel, gear, and an exposed operator trying to steer by partial visibility, and the machine becomes a steel block entering unstable ground through moving water. The machine was built for traction. It was not built for flotation. That mattered before the first blade ever touched French sand. Some of the bulldozers assigned to the assault were fitted with improvised armor to protect the operator and engine compartment from small arms fire. This turned an already heavy machine into an even denser one. Armor could save a man from fragments. It could not save the machine from depth, current, or a submerged hole in the beach approach. Once the tracks lost firm bottom, the dozer could settle, yaw, or simply stop while the sea climbed around it. And if the engine drowned, the operation ended there. Waterproofing a World War II bulldozer for an amphibious landing was never a perfect science. Air intake extensions, exhaust protection, sealed ignition systems, grease-packed fittings, temporary covers, and field modifications could reduce risk. They could not erase it. Salt water entered wherever preparation failed, and preparation often failed under battle conditions. One weak seal, one wrong wave, one deeper channel than expected. That was enough. The planners knew some losses were likely. What they could not fully control was where those losses would happen, or how quickly a delayed machine would become a permanent seabed casualty. A bulldozer that stalled in shallow surf blocked more than itself. It obstructed following traffic, complicated unloading, and forced engineers to work around dead steel under fire. A bulldozer that slipped off a ramp into deeper water might disappear almost immediately, taking its operator with it if escape failed. That was the real edge of the problem. These machines were not just tools being transported to a battlefield. They were entering the battlefield as part of the assault, at the moment when navigation, tide, enemy fire, and sea state were all least forgiving. On paper, 14 bulldozers launched toward the Normandy beaches represented engineering foresight. In practice, they were heavy crawler tractors being asked to do something close to amphibious work in an environment that punished weight and hesitation. Some made it in, some did not. And before the morning was over, several of those machines would be lying in the channel, lost not because they lacked power, but because power meant very little once steel, surf, and bad depth met in the same few seconds. June 6, 1944. Off Normandy, the difference between a usable landing and a drowned machine could be measured in a few feet of water. As the landing craft closed on the assault beaches, the dozer crews were already inside one of the worst combinations a crawler tractor can face: unstable bottom, moving water, poor visibility, and no second attempt. Some LCTs were forced to unload under conditions rougher than planned. Ramps dropped into surf instead of firm shallows. The tide and sea state varied by sector. In some places, the machines could crawl down, find bottom, and force their way forward. In others, the seabed fell away too quickly. That was the moment the operation stopped being mechanical routine. A bulldozer entering shallow water can survive if three things hold at once. The tracks find support, the engine keeps breathing, and the operator has time to correct for yaw as the water pushes against the blade and side armor. If one of those fails, the machine becomes difficult. If two fail, it becomes nearly unrecoverable. On D-Day, several failed together. Some of the bulldozers launched from their landing craft too far offshore. Others appear to have been put into water deeper than the crews had expected, whether from navigation error, rough approach, or the simple fact that under combat conditions, exact depth judgment from a pitching craft was never reliable. The front of the machine would drop first, the blade bite uselessly into water, and the weight would shift forward. Then the sea would come over the tracks, up toward the engine, and into the operator's problem all at once. The machine had power. The bottom did not. A crawler tractor does not sink dramatically at first. It settles. It loses confidence before it loses sight. The tracks stop climbing. The nose pulls down. Water begins to work around the engine compartment and the operator's station. The machine is still there, still visible, still close enough to look recoverable. Then the next swell arrives. The stern of the landing craft moves away, and the dozer is no longer crossing. It is drowning. Several of the 14 bulldozers never reached the beach. They were dropped into the channel and lost in the surf before they could begin the work they had been sent to do. In some cases, the operators escaped. In others, they did not. The historical record on exact operator losses varies by unit and beach sector, but the machine losses themselves were real enough. Heavy crawler tractors gone in water too deep and too chaotic for immediate recovery, back to the beach. The dozers that did make it ashore proved why they had been included in the invasion at all. Once on firmer ground, they began doing exactly what the planners had hoped, pushing aside wreckage, dragging obstacles, opening lanes, and helping create movement through beaches that were rapidly becoming jammed with damaged craft and stalled vehicles. On heavily contested sectors, that work happened under direct fire. On others, it happened under the constant pressure of tide and traffic. A lane cleared 10 minutes too late could still become a trap. Mechanically, the surviving machines were invaluable because they solved problems of mass. A man with wire cutters can clear wire. A demolition team can blow a gap, but a bulldozer can move tons of debris immediately. And on D-Day, the beaches were becoming fields of dead weight. Smashed timbers, steel obstacles, drowned trucks, crippled carriers, and landing craft that had discharged badly or not at all. The Dozer was the only machine in the first waves designed to impose order on that kind of material, fast enough to matter. That does not make the losses incidental. It makes them easier to understand. The bulldozers were asked to operate in the narrow zone where naval delivery ended and ground traction began. That zone was the most dangerous part of the entire assignment. Too early, and the machine entered water it could not cross. Too late, and the landing craft stayed exposed longer, adding delay and congestion to a beach already under pressure. The recovery plan assumed a margin. The sea did not. This is why those 14 machines still matter. Their story sits inside a larger truth about amphibious warfare. Even the most practical equipment becomes experimental when it is pushed into an environment it was never truly designed to enter. The bulldozer was one of the most useful engineering tools of the 20th century. On land, its strengths were obvious. In surf, under fire, launched from a moving craft, those strengths narrowed to almost nothing if the bottom was wrong. The machine was built for earth moving. It was not built for sea entry. In the aftermath of D-Day, the beaches were eventually cleared, exits were opened, and the invasion held. That larger success can make the smaller machine stories disappear inside it, but the dozers lost in the channel were part of the price of that success. They were not background equipment. They were frontline engineering machines committed at the exact moment when the operation was most fragile. Some remained where they went down, swallowed by sand, current, and time. Others may have been broken up later by sea action or salvage. For the operators and engineer units involved, there was little romance in it. A bulldozer had been needed. A bulldozer had been sent. The water took it before the blade ever touched the beach, and that is the lesson inside the incident. Mechanically, the failure was simple. A heavily loaded crawler tractor was introduced into water deeper and rougher than its margin allowed. Once buoyancy, footing, and engine survival all went uncertain at the same time. Horsepower could not save it. Operationally, the loss was accepted because the mission required immediate beach clearance and there were no safer machines available for that exact job in that exact hour. Historically, the incident matters because it shows how much of D-Day depended not just on courage or planning, but on whether steel could survive the first few yards. Some of it did. 14 bulldozers were dropped toward Normandy before dawn. Several never came back out. The invasion moved forward anyway. The machines disappeared. The work did not. If you've worked around crawler tractors, surf zones, or military recovery equipment, tell us what part of this operation you would have trusted least. The landing craft, the depth judgment, or the machine itself. And if you want the next machine story from the same war, watch the episode on the bulldozer that pushed live bombs off Iwo Jima's runway in 1945.